I did not realize till I was 50 that I had low self-esteem. And I thought that constantly criticizing myself and beating myself up was going to make me better. Low self-esteem is disrespect of self. Fixing it is the simplest thing in the world, but it is the most difficult lesson I have ever learned and the lesson I still learn.
Hey there, it's Ginny.
And I'm Monica.
And this is Hitting Her Mark,
a podcast for women in the arts, actors, filmmakers, artists who are passionately chasing their creative dreams,
while juggling the beautiful chaos of caring for those they love.
We're here to share stories, insights, and inspiration, proving that you can hit your mark without compromising what matters most.
So if you're ready to make your creative dreams a reality, let's dive in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Hitting Her Mark. We've got a great guest for you today. Today's guest is a true Canadian icon, Dini Petty. You probably know her from the Dini Petty Show, where she made her mark as one of Canada's most recognizable talk show hosts. But before that, she was literally flying high, logging over 5,000 hours as a helicopter pilot and becoming one of the first female traffic reporters to take to the skies. Beyond television, Dini's also an author, producer, and passionate philanthropist who's dedicated her time to countless causes that support women, children, and community development. And now she's taking that same energy into her next chapter with Trailblazing Talks, a new show inspiring the next generation of changemakers. We can't wait to dive into her incredible journey and find out what's next. Thank you so much for listening, and please welcome Dini Petty.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We're so excited. Today's guest is a true Canadian icon. She's a groundbreaking broadcaster, a former pilot, award-winning talk show host, a writer, advocate. I mean, I could go on, but we would love to hear directly from you. Dini Petty, thank you so much for being on Hitting Her Mark.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Again, you've had so much going on. Take us back to when you were a little kid. Did you ever think, and I know that you grew up in sort of an entertainment world, both of your parents were in the industry. What did you think about your future self?
I never thought I would be in the business. My mother was Canada's first talent agent, Molly Petty Producer Services, and she moved her offices to the front room of our home when I was 12. And you people, you actors and voiceover and beautiful women and men started going to the front room of my house. And I'm like, who are these people? And what is this all about? Every once in a while when I would work in the office, if a model around my age didn't show up because the first time she'd been in a minor car accident, I'd hear the battle cry, Dini, grab a full-length white slip, jump in a car, go to this address. And I'm like, wow, this is going to be gorgeous. So I get to the photography studio. I'm 17. I wear the white slip. They pad me to be 9 months pregnant. I stand in the darkened hallway, one hand in the lump, the other over my mouth as if I'm going to throw up for an ad that was entitled, I didn't want to have my baby. So, show business that
Was that your first?
No.
No. Okay.
No, my first was just as bad. When my mom had her office downtown, I'm 11 years old. I went down after a dental appointment to wait for her. And there's an audition going on with girls around my age. I was kind of big for my age. The director, of course, went to the washroom, went back in and said, who's that girl? It's my daughter. She's not an actor. I want her to, she's not, I got the part. They shot it at my school. So, I have the lead role in a half-hour National Film Board production that's on television. I'm 12, and everybody in my school and everybody I know is watching. So I sit down the night that it's on, and as you both know, you sometimes don't get the whole script. You get your farts so they can add a voice over it later, which they did in this one. The very opening of this, black and white, is me, 12 years old, in bed asleep. And you hear my mother and dad yell, get up, Sylvia, get up and go to school. And I get up and I yawn. And then this deep male voiceover says, ordinary looking little girl, isn't she? welcome.
God.
Then from that to the pregnant hallway. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe showbiz isn't for me. So far it's not working out that great. However,
My goodness.
However,
and
that path did lead
wanted
you.
you.
Yes.
In a slightly different direction, though.
I worked for a friend of my parents named Dean Peterson, who owned Canada's first production, one of the first production houses in Canada. In fact, he produced and directed the first television commercial made in this country. So I worked for Dean and he produced a couple of documentaries. My first big one was Safety in the Workplace. That was a biggie. And when he closed the doors, I'm out of a job. And I'd befriended Peggy Clarkson, this stunning, drop dead gorgeous woman who was a model. And she called, she said, Dini, I'm going to buy you lunch. I'm paying. We're going to figure out what you're doing for a living. I'm like, I'm in Peggy. So we went to Castle George. And when we came in, 3 guys came in from CKY radio. And at that time, all traffic reports were done from helicopters with 2 guys. One flew, one reported. But at CKY, Bob Carter was doing both. So as we sit down, these 3 guys come in. We knew one of them socially. Tommy said hello. He knew I jumped out of an airplane. I was a lousy skydiver. I never really got comfortable with it. And so I finally quit. But he didn't know I was lousy. He just knew I'd done it. So in the course of their conversation, their problem comes up because now there's a helicopter war going on. All the stations are buying second helicopters. And 3 weeks before this luncheon, they have a big meeting and their PR guy walked in. God bless you, Harvey Clark. And said, I know how we're going to win the war, boys. We're going to find a girl. She's going to fly the helicopter. She's going to report. We're going to paint it pink. She's going to wear pink. Go find her. Meanwhile, back at the luncheon, the guys are, where are we going to find a girl to fly this helicopter? Tommy looks over and he says, see that girl over there? That's Dini Petty. Now I know she's crazy enough to jump out of an airplane. Maybe she's crazy enough to fly a helicopter. I swear to you, as he's walking towards me, Peggy just said, so what are you going to do, Dean? I said, I don't know, Peggy, long before computers. I can't be a secretary. I can't spell, but I want to be challenged. I want to use my brains. And there was a tap on my shoulder, and I looked up and I heard the words that changed my life. How'd you like to be the girl in the pink helicopter? Sure. Yeah. And that's how it happened.
Dini, did you learn to fly the helicopter for that role, or were you already involved in aviation?
God, no. I'd never thought of being a pilot. My dad used to drag us to air shows when I was a kid, and it was so boring, and they were all men. I never thought of being a pilot. They taught me to fly. They paid for
Wow.
everything. And I have 5,000 hours flying time, and it was the most wonderful part of my life. It changed me completely. Being up there, you think, that when we look at beehives, we're fascinated. You want to go up 1,700 feet and look at us every day. We got beehives beat by a long shot. But in 5,000 hours, I did 6 traffic reports an hour. And that means that 30,000 times I either said, traffic northbound on the parkway is stop and go, or stop and go by the exhibition grounds. At 4,000 hours, I thought, I have to get out of this job. I love flying. I keep doing this. And that led me.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge of that role, Dini? Like what did you learn about yourself and even the industry? Because was it frowned upon being a woman, one of the only women at that time doing a job like that?
Aviation has always been a boys' club. And back then, I'm 23 years old. I'm 5'6". I weigh 120 pounds. I walk into the heliport. It's all men. It's all men. There was one girl, she answered the phone. And I go, hi, I'm Dini Petty, and I'm going to learn to fly and be the reporter. And they are like, go for it, sweetheart. Give it your best shot. They had a pool and how long I'd laugh. And the mechanic almost cost me my life on one occasion because he didn't believe that men belonged in the air. And I was flying a machine, and fortunately, I didn't have passengers on these 3 occasions because a screaming passenger is so distracting in an emergency. And I'm flying the machine. Remember when your car used to miss just for a second, the engine would miss and catch? Well, when it happens at 1,700 feet, the helicopter, it's a little different. She missed, yawed, started to drop. I'm on her, about to do an auto rotation, and she caught. Her name was Thisbe. If you knew her well, you could call her Thiz. Thiz, we're close to the airport and Thiz home. So I land. I go in, say to the head mechanic, geez, this, that. And he threw the rag down, goddamn women, and walked out of the heliport. I get there
Oh,
the next morning, standing there with a clipboard. I said, what are you doing? He said, there's nothing wrong with this machine. I've checked it out. I'm just writing up a report. I think it's time someone talked to the pilot. I'm like 24 years old. I'm like, okay. I go flying and she's fine. 3 weeks later, the same thing happened. She missed. She yawed more violently. I got her. She started. I take her to the heliport. I land. I go, that's two. And he says, okay. I get there the next morning. He's writing another report. He said, look, we have completely checked her out. I had Doug Dunlop take her for, there is nothing wrong with the machine. I am writing a report that I'm sending to CKY radio and Hughes helicopter because it's time someone talked to the pilot. And if you can't do this job, get out of it. I'm like, okay. And then the third time, and I remember flying over downtown Toronto. If you're flying an airplane and the engine stops, you need a long thing to land it on. If the engine in a helicopter quits, you can fly it down, called an auto rotation. But I need a small space. So literally, I'm flying over downtown Toronto. I go, you know what, Ian, where would you? And I see a space, and I go, I'd go there. And it happened. She missed more violently. She yawed. We dropped like a stone, but she caught. She never let me down. I land, I go
wow.
to the next, okay, here's the deal. There's something wrong with that machine. If you can't figure it out, you're going to call Hughes helicopters and get somebody up here who can. And I am not flying it until you do. And by the way, I'm going to the station and I'm filing a report. They went over that helicopter with a fine tooth comb. And when they drained the oil, they found metal filings. This means you do not fix that engine. It means a part of the engine is dissolving. They take the whole engine, they order a new one. About a week and a half later, I go down and he's standing by my machine. And he said, I'm sorry. My belief that women do not belong in the air almost cost you your life. I am so sorry. We shook hands and we were friends from then on. But that's the kind of stuff you dealt with as a female pilot. It's changed now. A woman contacted me from Air Canada. I think there are 500 female pilots now with Air Canada, but it's changing from an all male world. But yeah, men have always been, I mean, I'm 80. I started in the business when I was what, 12, but 23 really. And it's a lot better. It's a lot better, but wow.
There's
Yeah.
still a
And then
long ways to go.
then there were the husbands.
Right. That's a whole other story. So are experiences like this, is that, because I know that you are a very strong female advocate, is this one of the scenarios, one of the things that sort of push you forward with that?
One of the things I talk about in my speech is most of us come from dysfunctional families. My father had PTSD from World War II. And, he'd get bad look in his eye or move a certain way and you'd run. And I was his favorite target, which is why I probably left and got married when I was 18. What a smart idea that was. But if you come from a dysfunctional family, I didn't realize there was a gift. If you're used to yelling and screaming and rage and anger, when you go out to the world to work with men and women, there are those who will use anger and screaming and ranting and raving. And when they would do that to me, I knew they couldn't hit me. I'd seen a lot worse. So I just wait till I finish and I go, okay, now what do you want to do? So if you come from that environment, there is a bit of an advantage to it. You're used to it. But if you've never been yelled at, if you've never been intimidated or treated badly, when it happens, it's pretty crushing.
Mm-hmm.
So the advantage of, dysfunctional childhood.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit, Dini, about your transition from that beloved helicopter and broadcasting the news. And you said at that one point, you're like, I got to get out of here. You then transition and you start with City TV. In 1979, you worked with City TV for a decade. You worked on a number of shows, but most notably City Line. You were also reporter and co-anchor for City Pulse, and you anchored Citywide, which is a current affairs show. What motivated you? I mean, you touched on it a bit, but What was that move like from radio into television?
Okay, first off, here's how I got the job. I called Moses and Eimer and I said, "You want to hire me?" And I had a bit of fame. I mean, I was known. And he laughed and he hired me. My first interview, self-confidence and self-esteem were totally two different subjects. Self-confidence is number of times through. First time you hit a golf ball, first time you fly a helicopter, first interview, you're not so good. My first live interview on camera, so bad I wish I had a recording of it. I was interviewing a great English actor, Patrick McNee, who was a historic series called The Avengers will part of it. I go into the studio and I'm nervous. I'm thinking, yeah, but so you're supposed to be nervous. I have all the questions in my head. I ask him my first question and I blank, startled deer in headlights. Patrick he leans over. I know. You want to know about the play I'm in? Yeah, tell me about the play you're in. I know. You want to know about my family? Yeah, tell me about your family. The whole freaking interview. Yeah, tell me about. Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, I was so bad. By interview, and you remember your first interview, you're not good. By your 20th, you know, and the same with everything you do in life. You're not good the first time. So self confidence is number times through. My first speech was not that great, but by speech number 20, I'm like and now I love talking to people. I enjoy being on.
That's wonderful. I love that story. And what would you say was the biggest learning curve or some of the challenges in your role of being on television and hosting? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but what was the biggest challenge you'd say?
I'll tell you the biggest lesson I learned. First person who did it was Phyllis Diller, and I didn't recognize what she was doing. The second person who did it was Leonard Cohen. And when Leonard Cohen did it, I realized what they had done. When people are being interviewed most often, they're not there. They're thinking about what they have to do after, where they've been, they're not there. Phyllis Diller and Leonard Cohen, when I turned to them, I had 100% of their attention. They were there. And when I realized that, I went, oh. And that's what I did for people. I was there 100%. I had a deal with myself when I walked in the studio. When I crossed the line, my personal life stayed behind me. The only time it didn't work was when Nick was in the hospital he had croup. And that was the only time. But the rest of the time, when you talk to me, you got me. I'm here. And it's so unusual. And you will notice this when you go out to a cocktail party or something. There's always the person that's talking to you, but they're looking around the room to see who they should be talking to. Or people are telling stories and they tell the story and you go, oh, yeah. When they finish that story, I'm going to tell my story. You're not there 100%. The ability to actually be there for someone in an interview 100% makes all the difference in the world. And then people would open up.
Yeah, and it's incredible. You had so many conversations with people, like emotional, with challenging subjects and topics. How did you navigate that? Because sometimes it was very sensitive stuff that you were getting in conversations with. Like, how did you navigate those sort of sensitive topics?
That's a really interesting question. Again, just being there and letting people talk and not having any judgment. If you go to Dini Petty YouTube, I put up some of my favorite interviews. And in about 3 or 4 days, I'm going to put up, I think I'll put up Maya Angelou and Bo Derek and Sophia Loren. And up there now, I have the one that's got the most views. And you're probably too young, but there's a guy named Red Skelton that older people, the guy's had almost 4 million views. So, yeah, just it's such a good question because I've had some really tough interviews, the most difficult ones I ever did. And when I started it, you could do a series on anything you wanted, and it would be a 5-parter Monday to Friday night. I did one on child abuse, go figure. And when it was finished on that Friday night, the news director came out of the control room and said, that was great, Dini. And now you're going to do a series on incest. And I went, okay. When the director tells you what you do it. And I'm like, I know what the word means. I put an ad in the 3 Toronto papers personal column, the Globe and Mail, the Star, and the Telegram. That's how long ago. female journalist doing research into incest. If you've had an incestuous or near incestuous experience, don't ask me why I said near incestuous, please write to Dini Petty 99. In 1 month, I had 300 contacts, and when we started calling, and you can't hang up. And those are the most challenging. And I had to find people to go on camera. And I did. I actually talked to a male perpetrator who there was a program in the US started by a guy named Hank Giorgetto, where half of the men in the program turned themselves in for help. That does not exist in Canada, although I ended up bringing Hank here to work with the Children's Aid to try to get that program started. It never got started. But, that was a tough call. I remember walking up and down the living room going, gee, I talk to this guy. His story was that he had this job for 25 years. He'd been fired. His wife started ragging on him. Everybody was nobody would talk to him. He ended up hiding in the garage. He was there for months, and the only person who would come and talk to him was his granddaughter, and he crossed the line and he turned himself in. Those, I'm still in touch with some of those women today. And I'll tell you a great story. One of the last women I met her in a restaurant with her husband and her 2 children. The family dynamic was so beautiful. And the husband and kids left, and I went over and I said to her, how did you do it? Because there's a group that never talk about the subject. It just eats them up from the inside out. Like the first woman who called me, I'm dying of cancer. I'm in Sunnybrook. I have to tell somebody. I was on the phone for an hour and a half. Like, can't hang up. Those who never tell anyone, those who get on the psychiatrist's couch and never get off, those who get off and don't deal with it, a huge percentage become lesbians. Cal Surprise. And this woman, I said, how did you do it? And she said something incredible. She said, Dini, I drew a line in the sand, and I decided that I deserved a good life, and that's what I have. And it took me a long time to get it. The magic word is deserve, because what do you believe you deserve? Because that is what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful lesson.
It's a huge lesson.
Yeah, because so many women in particular, but men suffer from this as well, but just imposter syndrome. So often we get in a situation where maybe an offer has come out of the blue and you've been approached a few times, like with that helicopter, and you're like, I've never flown a helicopter. What are you talking about? And so many of us would just immediately dismiss it. What advice do you have to women when they're faced with these opportunities where they're feeling self-doubt and they're feeling like I don't deserve this, or I'm not knowledgeable, I'm not qualified?
Self-confidence is number of times through equals self-confidence, right? Self-esteem is a whole different subject. I did not realize till I was 50 that I had low self-esteem. I thought constantly criticizing myself, because I was raised with helpful criticism. And I thought that constantly criticizing myself and beating myself up was going to make me better. That's low self-esteem. So low self-esteem is a learned behavior. No baby is born with low self-esteem. You can learn it in a couple of different ways. One, you're born into a family that treats you with disrespect. You are so stupid. You're so fat. You never do anything right, slam back. And you learn it's okay to disrespect yourself. And there's the key lesson. It's okay to disrespect yourself. But if you're born into a family that treats you with respect, but you're different. You go to school and you're too tall, you're too short, you're the wrong color. There's something physically wrong with you, and your classmates will teach you how to disrespect yourself. Low self-esteem is disrespect of self. Fixing it is the simplest thing in the world, but it is the most difficult lesson I have ever learned, and the lesson I still learn. Are you ready? To grow from low self-esteem to good self-esteem is food, water, rest, and exercise, because low self-esteem never goes away. It goes and sits up in the shelf. And when you're tired and run down and haven't eaten properly, it comes back. You're no good. This is just stupid. You'll never get that. You're not good enough for this. Food, water, rest, and exercise. I work out 3 times a week. I have my whole life. Water is one of my better. So many of us are dehydrated. God, I don't have time to sleep. Food, water, rest, and exercise. Those 4 things. So, respect of self,
Mhm.
food, water, rest, and exercise, is how you get rid of low self esteem. And there's one more lesson. These are my big lessons in life. The biggest aha of my life, that was one of them, is learning to take care of myself first. And my God, it's hard. It's just, I'll skip lunch. Oh no, God, I'm so busy.
Mm.
But the other one I learned when I worked on Third World Aid, and my first assignment was in Romania. And I don't know if you know the backstory, but Ceausescu, who was insane, outlawed abortion and birth control. And the second poorest country in Europe, that year he sold off most of the crops. I think about 30,000 people starved to death. And people have children they can't feed and they're having babies. So they're giving them up to these orphanages, believing that they would be fed and taken care of. Estimates, which are records were never kept, guess between 2 to 500,000 children went into these orphanages. They were left in cribs. They were seldom touched. They were seldom fed. They did not get 1 second of education. The lucky ones died. The unlucky ones, when they opened adoption and the sex trade moved in.
Ah.
And I'm in my third orphanage, and I'm in this courtyard, and there's this little girl, and she's like a lot of the children I saw. She didn't move. Maybe rocked a little, and a tear you roll down her cheek. So being a mother, I take her by the arm and I get her to sit beside me and I start rubbing her back. I work off kinetic energy. I feel things. And I stood up, and suddenly everything I understood on any level that I could understand didn't make sense anymore. And my whole world tilted slightly to the left, right. And I heard this crack, and that crack in my soul is healed. There is still a scar. When I went to work on Third World Aid, because I'm a good helper, I literally had this thought in my mind, I'm embarrassed to say, okay, now I'll go help save the world. When my whole world tilted and I heard that crack, a shaft of sunlight hit my face and I had the biggest aha of my life. I cannot save the world. The miracle will be if I can save myself. And the miracle will be if you can save yourself, because you can't save anybody. We waste so much time trying to save. And by the way, one last thing about low self-esteem. If you have it, your children will copy it from you. So if you have children, the best thing you can do, food, water, rest, and exercise. Save yourself first. Take care of yourself.
That's beautiful, Dini.
Oh, thank you.
That's such an important lesson for mothers, especially
Mhm.
because so often we think the self-sacrifice is what is appreciated, but it does start with us.
I guess it's the idea of filling your cup before you can fill your kids' cups, basically. Yeah.
The miracle will be if you can save yourself.
Hmm. On that note, since we're bringing up children and the podcast is very focused on women pursuing creative careers while juggling all of life's responsibilities. And Dini, you had a lot of responsibilities, especially as you entered in to the next decade of your life, which was the Dini Petty show. You joined CTV. It was a national daytime talk show that ran for about a decade. You did interviews with celebrities and you did lifestyle segments. It garnered a bunch of awards, but you also had children during that time. How did you manage to balance it all? What was that like for you?
Well, I mentioned husbands before. I'm very lucky. I'm extremely lucky. I've had 10 close calls and one certain death experience. And every time I have escaped unscathed. But, the universe likes a balance. So I had really bad luck with husbands. That's got a big S in the end. So I ended up alone, support of 2 children, because you're Dini Petty. You don't need any money. You're, whatever. But I had a live-in housekeeper. And I would like to, Dorothy Johnson, who took care of Samantha when she was itty bitty, when I lived in the farm and I was in television, and I are still friends to this day. Nila Descarga, I would like to bow at your shrine, and Belma and Shirley, and these wonderful, wonderful women who were literally second mothers to my children and really good people. Every woman needs a good wife, and that's what I had.
Yes, we all need a good support system.
Oh,
Absolutely.
and my parents were, they're a lot. I mean, they were babysitters, so I was very lucky in that way. Yeah, it's awful. Next life, no kids, keeping the money, I'm done. Have I mentioned that in the crowd? About 3 women put up their hands, going in, I'm in.
Yeah.
It's incredible, Dini. It seems like every decade of your life and your career, you seem to reinvent yourself. In your later years, you've authored books, children's books, you've launched products, you've been heavily involved in charitable work throughout your career. And now you're returning to TV with your new TV show, which I'd like to get into. But I just want to get a sense first, how do you decide where to channel your energy next?
I said that I'm lucky. And the great thing about being in the media is that you can do so much good. I went to honor one of the Waters family who had passed away. The Waters family owned Chum, and then they owned City for a while. And Jim Waters, it was at his celebration of life. And I worked at City. Some people came to me, and we held a meeting, and they said, look, we want to reach teenage girls if they're pregnant. We want to help them. If they want an abortion, we'll help them. If they want to keep the baby, we'll help them. But how do we get to them? I said, well, that's simple. Chum Radio. And Jim Waters said, of course, we'll help you. It's free. Let's do it. So they did this pregnancy youth line, which was very successful. And then it ended. 4 or 5 years ago, I'm up in the corner LCBO. I'm a frequent visitor. And there's a woman behind me with my favorite bottle of champagne, which is the Clicquot, or Champagne of the Widow. And she looked at me. She said, are you Dini Petty? I said, yes. She said, do you remember the pregnancy youth line? I said, oh, my God, yes. She said, well, I worked on that. I said, ah. She said, it did really well. I said, yes, I heard. She said, but we ran out of money. And I said, I know. And she said, so we closed it, but we got more money and we started it up again. But we changed the name. I said, what did you call it? She said, The Kids Helpful, which is huge. So good ideas, when you're in the media, you have so much power to bring people together to help. And all you have to do is use your position for good. And if you get the chance, of course you will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we'd like to think, right? And you've really delved into that on many fronts. Amnesty International. I mean, you've done so much charitable work, but not everybody does, to be honest, right? Not everybody in the media who gets the opportunity to does do that. So I do want to commend you for you using your power and your influence for this.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. My saying is, if I can, I will. If I can't, no need to apologize. Which goes back to save yourself,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great line. That's something to scribe, post up on a Post-it note to remind yourself.
I think that's a great segue into Trailblazing Talks. And it's a new series that explores legacy, purpose, and the courage it takes to keep leading at every stage of life. Why have you chosen to do this show now, Dini, and what does it mean to you?
I was 23 and somebody said, do you want to fly a helicopter? I said, yeah, sure. Somebody said, do you want to go back to television? I was like, sure, okay. Yes. When people say something, say yes. So from bad comes good, the Buddhists believe, and I believe that's true in many cases. And in this case, that's how I ended up back on TV. I did a one-woman show many years ago I originally called it The Moth, The Flame, and the Lemming. And creative people would smile, but a lot of the public went, what? So I called it A Broad View. Then I went in the second one, and the second one is called Men and Other Furry Creatures. And I was to do the open night, and I was working with some supposed producers. People bought tickets, and I'm trying to find a nice word besides they screwed up. It was canceled. Kate Campbell, a friend of mine who I met because she did this fabulous film Boundless, and her grandmother was a pilot, and her grandmother flew out of Buttonville and remembered this girl who used to fly the pink helicopter. So I did a role in Boundless, paid bought a ticket, and she got angry. She said, "That's crazy. Okay, you know what? We're going to do a television series, and you want to do it?" And I went, "Yeah, sure, let's." So it's all Kate Campbell's fault.
Kate Campbell. Yes, I've had the pleasure of meeting her at a table read, and she is going to be a guest on our show at some point.
Good.
Yeah, we're very excited that you two are working together.
Yeah, she's why? I have a lot of energy. Kate outdoes me. Do you know she won a medal for jumping hurdles? Like a provincial
I
medal.
didn't know that.
Oh yeah, she's a serious athlete, and that girl's a long distance runner. So done we've done 5 or 6, and I have one more to do. And they're running on it on your computer. Just go to thenewsforum.ca, and it's running on cable. So if you own cable, it's on Monday nights at 9 o'clock. And I have one more interview coming up, and I'm so excited to interview you guys. Ought to interview this woman. Um, and Peter, she's an Inuit woman who designs clothing. She became a lawyer. She lives up in the Arctic. She's an extraordinary human being. And the one place I've never been in Canada, I haven't been to the Arctic. I've seen the rest of this country, but I've never been up there. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh,
That's
that's wonderful. Do you have, Dini, any practical advice that you would offer to, I don't know, 2 young women who are launching a podcast or a talk show of some sort, or any creative platform? Any practical advice you'd offer women who are doing something of that nature?
Well, from what I've seen, you pretty much got it covered. You know what you're doing. So much of it is your guest. People when I'm going to put up, as I said, Bo Derek and Maya Angelou, getting the guest, because when I started, I remember at City TV, we couldn't get a guest. Yeah, I know you flew the helicopter, but yeah, so what? I don't want to be in your show. And getting interesting women to talk about their lives and open up, that's a huge part of it. And you're good at what you do. You actually do listen, and you obviously let people talk. My God. Imagine somebody watching that, and I just said that, and they were like, Jesus, that woman hasn't shut up for hours.
It's the whole point of the show. We want to hear from you.
And the biggest lesson I learned from television, which got reinforced lately, not everyone's going to like you, honey. And before the computer, they used to write. I literally got a letter. I cannot believe anyone so unattractive with such a grating voice could have her own talk show. Here's Susan. Dear Susan, change the channel. I love TV.
And you wrote her back.
Yeah, change the channel. And
I just need to comment on how funny you are.
Change the channel, Susan.
I think that's, my greatest gifts is I have a sense of humor, and I can laugh at myself, which I've done a lot. I went to the gym the other day and had the world's most interesting, short but interesting conversation. A guy that I work out with, who's often there when I work out, had left the gym, and he approached me on the street. And this is how the conversation went. He started, "I saw you on television. I didn't know you were who you are. I am who I am." And I walked away with, "Did that just happen? Did that just..."
So cryptic.
And if people lie to me, I am who I am. And you know who said that? Popeye. Is that Popeye the same?
Well, that's right.
Please. People would write, and it's just incredible. And there was a couple of articles on me recently, and I had to learn the lesson again. In the comments, there was a couple they showed and one they didn't. So I clicked on the one they didn't. I was at this event hosting, and Dini Petty was there, and she was so rude to everybody in the crew, and I will never forget. And everybody there hated her. And I'm like, I don't remember that night. And it bugged me for a day or two. And I went, Dini, not everyone's going to like you. Let it go. There's somebody out there watching this now. It's like, she never stop or shut up. I can't stand her. Because not everyone's going to like you, baby. As you all know.
That's
right.
That's really good advice, because it's true. You can't have those voices leading your path forward. You have to put that aside and go after what you want, which you seem to have done throughout your life. And it's really impressive. I mean, and inspiring.
When I started at City, a guy who was a big director wrote a big article, I think it was in the Globe or the Star, on women in television. And in last place, with the least chance of ever making it, the lowest IQ, the most unattractive and boring was, guess who? About a year later, I pick up the phone on my senior producer's desk and I go, hello. And it's the guy. I recognize his voice. And I go, hi. Oh, hi, it's Dini. "Oh, Dini, you're so much better. And I think you're going to read really well. And I said, I'll tell Joan you called.
That's great.
Well, I'm glad that, some of these people who have really doubted you at least have the sense, once they've been proven wrong, to come out and apologize.
Yes.
Not all.
Not all of them. You're still waiting on a few.
So we are reaching our hour now. So there's a couple questions that we like to ask all of our guests, Dini, before we let them go. So one question is, if you have received any advice from a mentor that has stuck with you over the years and guided you that you could pass along, or anything that someone's told you that really stayed with you and helped push you forward?
I really only had one mentor. I only had one person who took the time. I went to interview John Blackard, who was then Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. The tape screwed up, so the cameraman went and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm trying to raise money for this, Feed Kids in School breakfast program was just starting, and I'm not having any luck. And he called him, his assistant. He said, Dini, we'll be back tomorrow. What time can you come? And I'm going to teach you how to raise money. I didn't realize he'd done that for the Liberal Party very successfully. John Blackard taught me how to raise money. And within a month, I raised, I can't remember, it was $20,000 or $30,000 to start that program. So if you ever want to raise money or get people on side, here's how you do it. You can't do it in a letter and you cannot do it by phone. You have to do it in person. And when that person agrees, you get them to give you the name of one or two other contacts. And that's how I went out and raised the money. And then when John Blackard died, I had a stack of books about that high that I hadn't read. He would send me books. He would read this one. Read this one, read this one. And he would call and ask me for advice. He's the only true mentor I ever had. That was one of the best piece of advices I ever got. If you want to get out there and get something done, you have to do it in person.
Face to face. Yeah. It's the honor system.
I do have one more question. With your new show, what is your hope for it? Where do you see it going? How do you want it to be received?
I think anytime you interview somebody or do something on television, you want the audience to gain something from it, to learn something, to be inspired, to take away something that's of value to them so that they don't waste their time watching some ridiculous show on Netflix about, God, can we get rid of the serial killers? Oh my God, I'm so tired. If they can walk away with something that they've learned. And I've had so many people over the years go, I was watching your show and that man and I learned this and I want to thank you. I said, that wasn't me. That was you looking. And the answer came through the guest. There's a man I want to interview and I hope he's still with us. Clive Chamberlain is a psychiatrist who I interviewed in my City days. And he's a man who dealt with every teenage child that had committed murder. A lot of these kids came from abusive homes. So if you take 100 kids that came from abusive homes, 50 or 60 would run away. A lot would put up, one would turn around and kill the parent. And he wanted to know why. But what was fascinating in our conversation, and this is something to explore, there was so much violence and anger in society today. But here's what he said. Children, and we're going back in my City days, are surrounded by violence. In the games they play, in the shows they watch on television, in everything is got so much violence that they're becoming immune to it. And I suspect, and that's why I'd like to talk to him again, that that's what's caused a lot of the issue. And that and the fact that COVID, I didn't realize. I have a friend of mine who's a vice principal of a high school. What a hard time kids are having because of COVID. The ability to learn to be alone with yourself is a great gift.
That's
Yeah.
great. It's our final question, Dini. It's what we ask every guest. When you hear the phrase hitting her mark, what does that mean for you? How do you define success in your life? And it can be personally, professionally, however you interpret it.
How do I define this? Doing something that I enjoy, that I can give my full self to, that works. And God forbid they should pay me on top of that.
That's a great answer. Dini Petty, thank you so much for joining us on Hitting Her Mark. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Okay, take care of yourself, love, because if you don't, no one else will.
Thanks for tuning in to Hitting Her Mark. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. For more content and updates, follow us on Instagram at Hitting Her Mark.